So, if you're here, welcome back. We're going to be going through Libra through Pisces for Venus signs. Also, I do apologize. I be doing these little, cause child, I keep forgetting of the sound part about doing this. So I apologize if sometimes my content sounds awkward because there's no sound in the background. It just kind of is what it is. We're learning as we go, going as we learn, right? Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about Venus and Libra. Autumn, the equinox, the time where the light and the dark are perfectly balanced, and the world holds its breath in that equilibrium for one suspended moment before the descent begins. So, Venus in Libra is the second home of Venus's home sign. And like Venus in Taurus, there's a particular fluency to how it operates. But where Taurus Venus loves through the body, Libra Venus loves through relating itself. If you have this placement, the experience of being in partnership isn't something you do alongside the rest of your life. It is, in some fundamental way, how you experience yourself. You understand who you are through the mirror of another person. You think more clearly in dialogue than in solitude. And your desire nature isn't just drawn to partnership, it organizes around it. See, early autumn is a season of balance, evaluation, and the beginning of reflection, and the outward growth of spring and summer has peaked. So now the movement is toward relationship, toward weighing, toward the question of how things stand in relation to each other. And the logic encoded in your Venus is the logic of harmony as a survival need, not as a preference or as an aesthetic, but as something your system actually kind of requires to function. Disharmony in your relationships for y'all, it doesn't just upset you, it destabilizes you. Conflict doesn't just feel unpleasant, it feels like the ground is tilting. And this is where the shadow lives. The same relational fluency that makes you extraordinary at partnership, at reading the room, at knowing what someone needs before they say it, at creating beauty and ease in shared spaces, can also make you disappear into other people's preferences. What do you want? I want what you want. See, that's not generosity. That's the early autumn logic running without a counterweight. The season of balance can become the season of losing yourself in the effort to make the scales even. Venus in Libra, at its least conscious, doesn't create harmony, it creates a performance of harmony that costs you your own desires, your own opinions, and your own honest reaction to things. So, what this means day to day is typically you're someone who needs partnership. And if you pretend you don't in a culture that increasingly valorizes independence and self sufficiency, it could cause more damage than admitting it. Just cop to it. But you also need to practice the specific discipline of having preferences that don't bend the moment someone else expresses a different one. I think the question isn't whether you're too codependent. I think the question is whether you desire or whether your desire for harmony is being expressed, I think, with your own voice still intact, or is it at the expense of it? I think that difference is kind of everything for this Venus and Scorpio. So this is a time where the leaves have fallen, the surface beauty is gone, and what's truly left is the trunk, the root system, the bones of things. This season acts as what survives when you strip away everything else. Because Venus and Scorpio, girl, it wants to know, child, and not in a casual way, not in a quote unquote tell me about yourself way, but in a let me see the thing you've never shown anyone else kind of way. If you have this placement, surface level connection is physically uncomfortable for your desired nature. Small talk feels like a lie. Pleasant dates where everyone performs their best self feels like a waste of time because you're scanning for depth the way other people scan for attraction. Not because you enjoy intensity for its own sake, but because your Venus encodes mid autumn logic. And mid autumn is a season where everything that isn't essential gets stripped away. You want the essential. You want what's left when the performance stops. And that makes you devastating to love and devastating to be loved by. Devastating to love because you don't open easily. And when you do, you open completely, which means betrayal doesn't just hurt you, it reorganizes your entire understanding of reality. Because you gave somebody the real thing and they treated it carelessly. And now you have to rebuild from a place that feels like nothing is trustworthy. Devastating to be loved by because your love comes with a level of attention that most people aren't prepared for because you see your partners, not just the version they present, but the whole thing, the motivations beneath the motivations, the fear under the confidence, the lie inside the polite answer, because your Venus, it registers this honesty kind of like a smoke alarm, and it's not going to be shutting off until you find that source. Because the mid autumn season's logic is transformation through loss. Things die to become soil for new growth, right? So the logic encoded in your Venus, it applies that same principle to intimacy. Real love requires the death of the false self. You need your partner to stop performing. You need them to survive being fully seen. And you need to do the same, which I think is harder because your Venus is so attuned to vulnerability as power. That showing your own vulnerability, it can feel like handing somebody a weapon. And a lot of times, anybody with any Scorpio placement anywhere ain't got that to do. So what this kind of means in your day to day is you need honesty more than you need comfort. The relationship that protects your feelings at the expense of truth is going to slowly suffocate. Choke the dog out of your Venus, okay? But you also need to distinguish between depth and control, because that same desire to know everything about a partner can become surveillance when it's driven by fear rather than love. When you catch yourself testing somebody, like if you're withholding to see if they're going to pursue, probing to see if they're going to flinch, that's that mid autumn shadow running the show. Because with real depth, the real recognize real, right? No, I'm kidding. I don't know how to say. Anyway, yeah, that's something horrible, probably. Real depth, it doesn't require tests. It requires the harder thing, I think, which is your own willingness to go first. Venus and Sagittarius. So this is late autumn, where the harvest is done. The world is opening out toward the horizon. We got bare trees, wide skies, long distance visible for the first time since spring. This is the season that says, there's more than this. Go find it. You see, Venus and Sagittarius, it loves through expansion, through meaning, through the shared experience of discovering something neither of you knew before you started. If you have this placement, love that stays still feels like love that's dying, because you don't need constant movement, you need constant growth. A new idea, a trip that neither you has taken, a conversation that changes how you see something, a shared philosophy that makes the world feel larger than it did yesterday. Because your desire nature is encoded with late autumn logic, which is the season where the visible world has been stripped back enough that the mind can finally see past the immediate and into the vast. This is the Venus that falls in love with someone's mind before their face, that gets more attracted to a partner after a long argument about something that matters, that needs the relationship itself to be a vehicle for becoming more aware, more free, more honest, more alive, to be to the sheer strangeness and beauty of just being here, I guess. Like if the relationship isn't teaching y'all something, your Venus is just, I feel like it's gonna just read it as finished, done, data, bye. Even if everything about it is function, even if everything else about it is functional, it's still just gonna read it as, all right, what are we doing here, girls? And I think the shadow for y'all is obvious, right? Because you've lived it. It's the thing that makes you need growth is the same thing that makes you run the moment growth feels like it requires staying in one place. Because late autumn is the season of departure, that last burst of pew energy before winter's stillness. I hate my sound effects. I just do them. I cannot help it. I'm sorry, guys. My little pew. I'm so glad I don't like film these like with like you seeing like my whole entire body, because if y'all saw like the way I moved, what the heck is wrong with her? But anywho, I forgot where I was talking. What were we talking about? Okay, so for y'all, we're gonna go. So your Venus, this is the Venus that falls in love more with someone's mind before their face. You get more attracted to a partner after a long argument about something that matters, and that needs the relationship itself. It becomes a vehicle for becoming more aware, more free, more honest, more alive, to be the sheer to the sheer strangeness and beauty of just being here. Like I said, if that relationship isn't teaching you something, your Venus will just read it as done, even if everything else about it is actually functional. So, talking about your shadow, this is where your Venus, it just carries that departure logic in its bones. And it just means that commitment for you can feel like a cage even when it's what you wanted. Because you're going to feel like I love you, but I need to be free. I want this, but I also want to be able to get my bags and get up out of here. And that tension, it doesn't resolve. It just lives inside the placement permanently. The question isn't how to get rid of it, because you can't. I think it's instead, how can you build a relationship spacious enough to hold both the love and the need for horizon? So what this can kind of look like for your day to day is you need a partner who has their own life, their own mind, their own adventures. The partner who makes you their entire world will eventually feel like a wall you can't see past. But you also need to recognize when the I need freedom is actually genuine, and when it's more of a reflexive escape from intimacy's demand, that you stop moving long enough to fully be present with what's right in front of you. Because late autumn's gift is also vision, and it's trapped using that vision to look past the person who's right there. Venus in Capricorn. Winter. This is when the ground is hard. The air is sharp. Nothing is growing, and the world has become a test of endurance. Not cruel, but honest about what the conditions actually are. See, Venus in Capricorn, it loves like early winter, slowly, seriously, and with a bone deep understanding that anything worth having has to be built over time. If you got this placement, you're not one that trusts easily. Not because you've been hurt, though. You probably have, but because your desired nature is encoded with the season's fundamental logic. Things that come fast die fast. The ground is frozen. Whatever is going to grow here has to push through stone. So your Venus, it applies that same standard to love. Prove it, not with words, not with feelings, but with time. See, this is the Venus that seems cold on the surface, and it's not. They get described as distant, hard to read by people who don't realize that early winter isn't cold because it doesn't feel. It's cold because feeling without structure around it is dangerous. You've watched people fall in love recklessly and get destroyed. Your Venus early on learned that desire without discernment is a liability. So you build your walls, not to keep love out, but to make sure that whatever gets in is strong enough to stay. See, the early winter season's logic is consolidation. You strip away what's unnecessary, you strengthen what remains, and you build for endurance rather than beauty. So your Venus applies that logic with an almost architectural precision to relationships. You're not looking for the most exciting person, you're looking for the most reliable, the one who shows up on the worst day, not the best one, the one who builds something with you over years that gets stronger as it ages instead of dimming after the first spark fades. See, the shadow sometimes is being very rigid and having that rigidness disguised as standards. You may just feel like, I'm not afraid of vulnerability. I just got me some high expectations. And sometimes fair enough. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes, however, it's the early logic, winter logic, protecting you from this one thing the season doesn't know how to handle, which is warmth that arrives without being earned. You see, Venus in Capricorn can reject love that comes too easily because the seasonal encoding, it reads effortlessness as unreliability. If it didn't cost anything, then how can it be real? But love doesn't always have to be earned, you guys. And allowing yourself to receive something you didn't work for might be the most growth this placement can access. So, what this kind of means for y'all day to day is you need to be building something with the person you love, not just being in a relationship, quote unquote, but constructing something tangible that exists outside the feelings. A home, a business, a life plan, a legacy. Your Venus, it feels most in love when it can see the evidence of that investment growing. But you also need to let yourself be soft sometimes without framing it as weakness, please, y'all. Because the walls do work, they've kept you alive. But the person beside them, behind them, deserves to be held without having to pass a test first. Even though I know Scorpio probably like the hell they can't. They need to pass these tests. Pass these tests. Venus in Aquarius. Deep winter. The freeze at its most absolute. This is when the world is abstract, silent, vast. Individual things lose their edges in the snow. Everything becomes part of a larger pattern. You see, Venus in Aquarius, it loves from a distance. And this is what people misread most as detachment. If you have this placement, you may have spent your life hearing some version of the same complaint. You don't let me in. You care more about ideas than people. You rather be in your head than here with me. And the complaint isn't entirely wrong, but it's wrong about what the distance means. Because deep winter doesn't detach because it doesn't feel. It detaches because it feels on a frequency that individual relationships can't always contain. Your desire nature is encoded with the season of vast systematic thinking, and your Venus, it reaches for connection that operates on that scale, not just some I love you, but I love what we represent. I love the idea of us. I love the future that we could build that changes things for more people than just ourselves, because this is the Venus that falls in love with someone's vision. This is the Venus that finds conventional romance slightly suffocating, not because it's unromantic, but because the conventions feel like containers that are too small for what the connection actually is. An Aquarius Venus doesn't want a relationship that follows a script. meet, date, commit, merge, replicate. No, they want a relationship that feels like two autonomous people choosing each other freely every day without obligation or expectation, forcing that choice. And see, freedom isn't the opposite of love for your Venus. I think freedom is love. The moment it becomes an obligation, I think for y'all, it stops being real. And the deep winter season logic is more abstraction. It's individual elements dissolve into systems, personal experience become collective patterns. Your Venus, it applies that same logic to intimacy, which is why you can feel from the inside like you're always watching the relationship from slightly outside of it. It's because you understand it in a conceptual way. You see the pattern of it, but dropping out of the observation into the raw, unanalyzable, messy experience of just being with someone, that's the edge your Venus keeps approaching, but then backing away from. So, like day to day, what this can typically mean is that you need intellectual respect more than some emotional validation. The partner who says, "Tell me what you think," will always reach your Venus faster than the one who says, "Tell me what you feel." But the growth edge for this placement isn't more thinking. I think it's tolerating the irrational, unexplainable, inconvenient reality that love is not a system. It's a thing that happens to your body in real time in the presence of a specific person who may smell a specific way and laugh at a specific pitch. And no amount of understanding it abstractly replaces the experience of surrendering to it. Your Venus doesn't need to stop being cerebral. It needs to let the cerebral coexist with the animal, right? Both are real. I think in this case, only one of them is trying to maintain control. Venus and Pisces, the final season, the thaw, where everything that was frozen starts to dissolve. Edges disappeared. Solid, it becomes liquid. The river, it swallows the bank. See, the boundary between you and everything else gets thinner until you're not sure where you end and where the world begins. You see, Venus in Pisces is traditionally considered Venus exaltation. This is the placement where the planet operates at its most elevated expression. And the seasonal logic, I think it explains why. Because late winter is a season of dissolution. And desire at its most essential is exactly that, right, y'all? The dissolving of the boundary between self and other. You see, your Venus doesn't just feel love, it disappears into it. When you love someone, you absorb them. Their pain becomes your pain. Their joy, it lifts you physically. The membrane between your emotional body and theirs becomes so thin that sometimes you can't tell whose feelings you're feeling. Because this is the Venus that knows things about a partner before being told. This is the one that finishes their sentence not as a habit, but because you're already inside the thought with them. This is the one that cries at music, at films, at the specific way the light looks at a certain hour. Because beauty isn't something you observe, it's something that enters you and takes up residence, builds a home. And so your desire nature, it operates on a frequency that most people only get to access in dreams or in the moments just before sleep when the thinking mind just lets go and everything becomes feeling without boundary. And I think the gift for this is obvious, a capacity for love that approaches the unconditional. See, Venus and Pisces can love the parts of a person that no one else can see because your Venus doesn't stop at the surface. No, it goes all the way through. The wound, I think, is equally obvious. In a world that requires boundaries, a desire nature that dissolves them is constantly at risk. You absorb people who hurt you. You love people who can't receive it. You pour yourself into connections that leak because the container was never built to hold what they're offering. And the culture tells you to set boundaries and protect your energy. And you try, but late winter doesn't hold boundaries. It doesn't know how. Ain't got no hands, y'all. The season's entire purpose is to dissolve them. So from day to day, this means your Venus will never operate the way the culture tells you love should operate. You're never gonna want in a moderate way. You're never gonna love with some clean edges. You will never stop feeling everything in the room and confusing it for your own experience. And as a also Pisces and a lot of other placements that's not Venus, I would say the task isn't to fix this, is to learn the difference between dissolving into somebody, which is your gift, and for dissolving for someone, which is your destruction. The first is intimacy so deep, it approaches the spiritual. The second is self erasure, dressed up as love. And I'm trying to tell y'all, from the inside, they feel almost identical. And that's why this Venus and all Pisces placements, they require more discernment than any other, not less. And it's because you feel everything. And the practice is learning which feelings are invitations to go deeper and which are invitations to disappear. So the seasonal framework doesn't read Venus as a fixed verdict about your love life. No, it reads Venus as a pattern encoded in your desired nature by the phase of the solar cycle it landed in. A pattern that shapes what you reach for, how you express wanting, and what you need from intimacy to feel like the real version of it. The value of knowing your Venus sign isn't prediction, it's recognition. It's the difference between why do I always do this and oh, that's the season talking. You see, most relationship advice, it assumes everyone wants the same things and simply fails at getting them. You want connection, commitment, honesty, passion. And if you're not getting those things, they say the problem is maybe your strategy or your choices or your attachment style. And sometimes that's very true, fair enough. But sometimes I think the problem is simpler and stronger than that. What if you're trying to love in a language that doesn't match your Venus's native tongue? You see, us, the person with Venus in Aries who's being told to slow down and take it easy in relationships, we're not getting bad advice exactly, but sometimes that advice could be written for a different season. Or someone's a Venus in Virgo who's being told to just accept people as they are. I don't think they're wrong to find that instruction almost impossible because their Venus was encoded to love through clear eyed improvement. And pretending otherwise doesn't make them more loving, it makes them less honest. See, your Venus sign isn't an excuse. That's what it's not. It doesn't make any behavior acceptable or any pattern inevitable, but it's a map of what you genuinely want, of how you naturally express that wanting, and of where the friction lives between your design and the culture's expectations of how desire should look and function. So I think you should read the map and let it show you what you already knew but hadn't been able to name. And then love the way your season taught you to love. Not less carefully, but more honestly. If you've been here with me to the end and to the second part, I thank you. I appreciate you. And I hope you have a good day.